What's up guys, Jimmo here again with Refinish Network, and today I am going to be talking about polishing and covering a bit of the theory behind what polishing actually accomplishes. So we're going to be looking at this scratch right here on this hood, and a general rule when polishing out a scratch is if you can catch it with your fingernail, the odds are it's probably too deep to sand out. For a scratch to come out, it has to be in the clear coat. So to put things in perspective, we'll have a look at this diagram here, where it shows that you'd have your primer, your base coat, and your clear coat, and you can see where the scratch is, and it would be a little mark out of your clear coat. So what would happen is you would be sanding down that spot flat, and you would end up with this. So you can see the scratch would be now sanded flat, however you have a bit less clear coat on now. Now it generally isn't a big issue to remove clear coat when you're taking a scratch off, but again, if it's too deep, then you're going to have significantly less UV holdout in that area, so it might be a bit more prone to fading. So here's a look at taking the scratch out using some 1500 grit paper. Now you can use anywhere from 1200 to 2000 grit, and there's some trade-offs depending on what you're doing, but if you use something like 1200, it's going to leave some coarser scratches which will be more difficult to remove with the compound in the next step. Keep sanding really close to the edge and your paper's on the edge, it'll melt right through that edge before you know it. So when you're done sanding, you're left with a hazy kind of look, a dull area, and that is completely normal, and we're going to take care of that once we start polishing. So I'm using the 3M polishing system here, and there's several different ones to choose from, but most better ones are going to be at least 2 to 3 steps. And what you're doing is you're gradually refining the scratch to a lighter and lighter scratch. So say we started off with our 1500 scratch, and when you start polishing, I'll give you just some crazy numbers. I don't know exactly what the grits would be, but let's just say this step here is going to be somewhere between 3500 and 4000 scratch. And when you get to the next step, it'll be between 5000 and 6000, and the next step will be 7000 and 8000. So you're gradually refining that scratch to a smaller and smaller scratch until you're left with nothing but a perfect shine. Now I'm using a wool pad for my first cut. You can use a wool or a foam pad. It doesn't really matter. The wool runs a little bit cooler and it's a little bit more aggressive, so the scratches it leaves are a little bit heavier, but it's just my personal preference. Either way, it doesn't really matter. So I'd be using a heavy compound for my first cut. It could be either a rubbing compound or an extra cutting cream, it might be labeled, but it would be a compound that's going to leave heavier scratches. And when you're done this step, you shouldn't be able to see any more of that haze. So if you kind of get down, look at a few different angles, and make sure you don't see that haze at all anymore, and then you should be ready to move on to the next step. At this point, your finish, it should kind of have that shine back, but it's going to have some heavier scratches that you can still see. So the second step typically would be a swirl mark remover, and with 3M it's a black foam pad, and this is going to be just a lighter compound than the other one, so this will work to take out the heavier scratches from what we just did with the white one. So if we left the scratches the way they were and just drove it this way, you'd have the heavier scratches in it, but you'd also probably see a lot of swirl marks, kind of hologram looks to it. And this step here should take somewhere between 3 to 4 minutes to do. You just kind of keep going over it until those heavier scratches have completely disappeared. So once you think you're done, wipe it down, have a look, make sure that it's looking pretty well near perfect before you move on to the final step. So the final step with 3M is the Ultra Fina on the blue pad, and it's actually used wet, so you kind of flick a little bit of water onto it as well as you're doing it, and this just works to remove any swirl marks that are left over. Now if you're on a budget, or if it's a vehicle that isn't such a dark finish, like you could get away with just stopping after the swirl mark remover, assuming it was on a lighter finish. Most people wouldn't notice much difference, but when it comes to a black, black really shows everything, so this is where you really want to make sure you're doing the final step, and that's going to give you that showroom finish when you're done. That's it for today guys, thanks for watching, and don't forget to click like and leave me a comment. And don't forget to check out my other polishing videos, including this black car. I have a video that I've done with polishing this car complete, so if you want to see the entire process, then check that one out. Later.